Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Marine Delage. I am the operations manager at Health Nexus. Before we start the presentation, I would like to introduce you to some of our FASD initiatives. So Health Nexus oversees several provincial initiatives relating to FASD. We allocate subsidies every year to over 40 support groups for individuals with FASD and their families. We designed an online training for service providers from various sectors, including healthcare and nursing, education, mental health and addictions, justice and corrections, and community and social work. And lastly, we manage the provincial FASD website, fasdinfo.tsaf.ca, where you can find recent and up-to-date information about what's happening, learn more about resources and tools, and find out services available in your local community. So during the presentation, you may be tempted to ask a question at the end about yourself or your loved ones with FASD. Please do not use any identifying information to protect people's privacy. By law, we have a duty to report to Children Aid Society or the police any threat to a child or direct attempt to harm yourself or someone else. Presenters cannot provide clinical advice as this would require professional counseling and more in-depth knowledge of the situation and behaviors at stake. Today's discussion provides information about latest research, evidence-based practice, or general education tips and advice. If you need ongoing support, please consider connecting with your local FASD worker for support or join one of our Health Nexus support groups for individuals with FASD and their families. Before we start the presentation, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, let's take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. Today, we are welcoming Dr. Jacqueline Pei. Jacqueline Pei is a professor in the School and Clinical Child Psychology program and assistant clinical professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Alberta. Dr. Pei began her career as a criminologist and forensic counselor working with incarcerated youth. Motivated by this early work, she returned to academia to study youth at risk, child development, and psychology. Now, as a researcher and practicing registered psychologist for over 20 years, her research focus includes identification and evaluation of interventions to support healthy outcomes for structurally marginalized populations. Dr. Pei has over 150 peer-reviewed publications and reports, but places the greatest value on her work with various community and government agencies. To view projects and community-engaged research initiatives, and to learn more about her research and her research team, please visit her website.
All right. Well, thank you, Maureen. So I'm Nancy Lockwood, and I have the good fortune of being the host for today and asking Dr. Pei some questions. So welcome, Dr. Pei. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Nancy. I'm looking forward to a bit of a conversation today.
Yeah, and that's what we had decided, was that we would just have a conversation format. We learned so much when you delivered the webinar last year about the Toward Healthy Outcomes framework. And we know you have more to share today. But to get us all on the same page, some people here today would have seen last year's webinar, some have not. So could you just give us a refresher about the Toward Healthy Outcomes program or framework?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And you can rein me in when I get going, and because you know how excited I get when I start talking about this framework, and certainly folks, as you have questions, I'm excited to hear what they are as well. So towards healthy outcomes, I don't know, maybe I feel in a storied mode today, but you know, really when I explain what it is. Maybe one of the ways I can talk about it is say, where did it come from? And once upon a time, early on, when I started working in this field, I worked a little bit with Dr. Sterling Claren, and he, like he does, challenged me in many ways to think differently and really think about what it means to really advance the work we're doing and come at things differently and pull people together. And he really emphasized the need for us all to be pulling together and coming together as we say, how do we support folks? How do we support success? How does this look? And enter into this conversation around FASD. So he said to me, because I was particularly interested in doing intervention work and support work and saying, you know, what does it look like to help folks get where they're trying to go in life? Those are questions that are of interest to me. And as a neuropsychologist, I'm kind of like, ooh, how do we, you know, help improve the way the brain's working? And questions like that are pretty exciting to me. So intervention and this area was really intriguing. So Sterling came to me and he said, well, Jackie, this is a really diverse population, FASD. He says, my challenge to you, he says, is you need to figure out how to identify outcomes. What are meaningful outcomes for this population? Because he says, if we can't get on the same page in terms of outcomes, we're all going to keep shooting in different directions. And he says, if we're going to pull together and find momentum from individuals to families to communities to governments and all these places, then to some extent, we got to figure out what we're pushing towards. And I'm like, oh, we're talking about folks who all have really unique brains and places and spaces. How the heck are we going to identify shared outcomes? He says, yeah, figure it out, Jackie. I'm like, thanks.
Tall order.
Yeah, I know, right? and I did not figure it out, but I did talk to a lot of people, and I talked a lot about outcomes, and I talked a lot about what does success mean, and and I think probably, and I don't know, I didn't write it down because I'm not that, you know, forward thinking, but you know, some of the most important people that I spoke to were families and individuals with FASD. And yeah, and those are, of course, the conversations that compel me, because I can talk to scientists till the cows come home, and we can all talk outcomes in a way that isn't always particularly useful, to be honest. But talking to caregivers and families, and they were like, well, you know, I just want to kind of keep developing. I just want to grow up, or I just want to have a life, or I just want to get a job, or I just want to do something meaningful, or I just want, and I'm like, wait a minute, those are the same goals I have, and John has, and
True.
Sam has, right? Like,
Yeah.
of course, they're the same goals. And so that took us towards healthy outcomes ultimately, where we said, you know, the first step is to say individuals with FASD are human beings like everyone else. And so they are striving towards the same goals and the same outcomes that we all are. And so we said, let's situate this idea of framing outcomes in just developmental progress. Let's think about what are those developmental things in life that are important to who we are as human beings, that support our development as human beings, and that allow us to think forward and plan forward in ways that are really meaningful and powerful. It allows us then, in doing so, to really humanize and normalize development and progress. And within that, imagine, okay, if we're working towards these things, then what might be barriers, and what might be challenges, and what might be strengths, and what might be opportunities? So we can have these really good conversations about how getting there might look different. But just because getting there might look different, or the type of employment might look different, it doesn't mean that having purposeful and meaningful things to do in your life is not important. And so that's where towards healthy outcomes came from. And that was the birth of it, was to say, let's reframe the way we're thinking about intervention. Let's structure it into these developmental spaces that we all hold as human beings. This allows us to shift towards strength-based language. It allows us to think about the autonomy and the engagement and what's meaningful to individuals. It allows us to put them at the center of their own lives, of course, that's where they belong. And it also recognizes the role and the importance of community and environment in supporting growth and development, as it's important for all of us. And so that was the start. The framework was created. It was an integration of information from FASD world, from developmental knowledge and psychology across the lifespan. What do we know and understand about development? Let's pull that all together. And let's add in that FASD informed lens, so then we can start imagining how we can work towards these goals and how we can all sort of strive towards these shared outcomes within our communities. And so that's where the original framework kind of came from, and it allowed us to highlight some of the philosophies and values that we think are really important to hold as communities. And allowed us to feature and highlight all of the great research that's out there, because we said, we need to have evidence. We need a way to make that evidence readily available to communities. So we're going to frame it in this developmental kind of, frame it in a framework, but we're going to place all of this research into this developmental framework, try to do our best to make it really accessible to communities so they can say, oh, this is what the evidence says. Oh, this makes sense. So as they pursue these goals, they can do so understanding, oh, this modification might be helpful, or this kind of support is really legitimate. Or in my gut, I know this is a good idea, but oh, here's the research that tells me I'm on the right track.
Right.
And all of these things. And so there we go. And that was framework number one. And well, it was something of a nutshell, Nancy.
Well, it is a nutshell. It's so interesting because it sounds like it's a framework that can still be customized and individualized for people, that it can be adapted that way.
Yeah.
But we know that there are updates that you have made. So that's my next question is, you now have a 2.0, I gather. What has been updated and why did you make these changes or additions?
Yes. Yeah, I'm super excited. Yay 2.0. And just as I know, it's kind of like giving birth, and I'm not going to go down that road too long, but I'm going to tell you that sometimes there's some pain in the process, but it's
Right.
there now. No, it's, just as the original framework was a product of community engagement and the wisdom of so many different people, 2.0 is no different. So the minute the first version was launched, we said to folks, tell us what you think, tell us what you're doing, tell us how it's working, help us out. And folks, being as amazing as they are and generous with their time, did just that. We like this, we don't like this, we've tried this, we're doing that, whatever. And all of this information, alongside the bubbling field of intervention that allowed us to, see the evidence base starting to grow more too. And we got to the point where we said, okay, it's time to make some changes and to reflect the wisdom of all of the folks using it, as well as the increasing research that we're seeing in the field. So we were able to retain some of the, we retained the core principles, the core philosophies, the driving ideas, but we modified elements of the presentation, the number of domains we have. We updated a few things in a few different ways to just try to reflect sort of the changing field and, frankly, the increased information that's out there, which is great.
And I know that there were originally 12 domains and you've actually decreased it. So can you share why you did that to 10, I think?
Yeah. Oh, you're very good. I know. I should have turned it over. I mean, Nancy, tell me what. Yeah, no, you're right on. And so we decreased it, and what we did is we actually took in two spaces, two domains, and blended them. And we did this really in part because of the research, in part because of the things that we were hearing from community. So one of the areas that we blended was we used to have sort of an attachment and family cohesion early on in the framework. You'll see them kind of sort of near the bottom of the framework. We had both of those. And what we learned, and what makes sense as you kind of try something out for the first time, is that those things go together. And separating family cohesion from attachment is really very artificial. And although we were looking to assert, with family cohesion, the importance of stability and talk to systems of support a little bit and talking about that and those pieces, the messaging was really lost and folks were kind of confused. Well, does this fit here or does this fit here? The other thing we learned is that folks said in general, they said, we understand this is lifespan and we appreciate that. We also understand there's not a lot of research about adults right now, but we still feel that the framework is too child focused and youth focused and not enough adult. And we're like, you guys are totally right. Of course you're right. And that's partly because the evidence was there. So we leaned into it, but they're right. So one of the things we were able to do is we took family cohesion, we took attachment, and we put them together. And we turned them into attachment and relationships. And we did that because we wanted to talk still about attachment in its traditional sense, which is that early life experience of safety and security, pardon me, in the way that you interact with adults and the extent to which you gain that understanding the world is a safe and secure place within which you can navigate. The implications of some of that and attachment can start early, but those attachment experiences can continue through the lifespan. And those attachment experiences are very closely related to relationships and also impact relationships. So as many of us know, early attachment experiences can have a profound influence on later relationships in life. And so by really pulling relationships into a bit more of a central space, even at the early stages, what we really sought to highlight was the fact that these early life attachments and relationships permeate that entire lifespan, and that the relationships that I have as an adult and that we continue to have are to some extent still influenced by very early childhood experiences, not directed and not inherently predetermined, but they're influenced. And that knowledge and understanding shapes the way we respond environmentally. So that was one space that we opted to change it, and felt that in changing it, we integrated things that can still assert that family cohesion matters. Investing in families is important. Caregivers need respite. All of those messages that were central to before, that do what you can to preserve the family units, do what you can to provide education and support, all still stand, because those are fundamental to creating the opportunity for attachment experience and really meaningful relationships. But you know what, even when somebody's 30, we should still be investing in relationships. We should still be understanding that if there's distrust, that distrust may associate with some of these early experiences. So let's understand that before we decide to jump all over this person, and those kind of spaces, because we want the framework to not only kind of communicate information, but to create space for folks to have genuine understanding. And with understanding, sometimes we can then be better equipped to adapt and modify in response to, needs, so that folks can continue to work towards those goals. And one of the goals we have in life is to have healthy relationships, to feel connected and loved and accepted. That does not go away no matter what age we are. So that blended. The other ones that the other two that we blended were a little bit higher up, if you remember the visual, and I can pop the new visual up after we're done talking, is the adaptive functioning and community engagement. And we blended those two together, not to lose them, because we think that they represent two very different things, but we heard from a lot of folks that they represent very interactive skills. So the extent in which I experience success within community engagement is sometimes related to my ability to engage in safe, adaptive functioning skills, right? And to make decisions and be effective in my thinking and those important pieces. What we retitled that, again, thank you to our community, folks who had such great wisdom, is we leaned in on the languaging around interdependency.
Yes.
And so we reframe that. Yeah, right, Nancy?
Absolutely. And we're all interdependent, right? We all are. We all need to lean on people, but I think it's very key in supporting people with FASD.
Yeah. And exactly, actually what you just said there, Nancy, is it really does, again, revisit that our goal is not to be independent in life. None of us strive for that, actually, because that's actually kind of lonely and isolating and
Exactly.
doesn't work so well. We strive towards the right balance of interdependence. And what we might need as an individual is all going to look different. And where I get help and where I don't need it, where I'm supported and where I'm not, that varies for every single person, all of us out there. So
and
we
that's
want
how
to.
I was just going to say, that's how I find to get buy-in when you're working with people with FASD is often they may not want to accept help. And I find it's helpful to be able to say, but we're all interdependent. Like, I can't fix my car. I need someone to do it. I can't heal myself when I'm sick. We all need to be able to lean on each other and get support for the things we have challenges with, and also share our strengths with others who could use our help too. And I find if you explain it that way, that we all are sharing our strengths and drawing on other people's, then you tend to get more buy-in. So I think it's important, but also how you present a model of interdependence is really important too.
I agree, Nancy. And you captured, in saying that, you captured, I think, one of these philosophies that we think we did a better job of reflecting by shifting to that. And that is an idea of autonomy. And how do we engage folks in their own lives? We've learned that supporting and working with folks with FASD is a with. I don't do for, I do with.
Yes.
And it's got to be a partnership. And I can offer certain things, but I can't do it without working with an individual and learning from that individual, just as I would anyone else. And so we hoped to find a little bit more of that, that empowered space in this document and provide those kinds of, examples or those ideas that do just what you're talking about. Create space to open a conversation, enter into a conversation, and enter into a relationship in a way that supports these goals. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. In fact, I was just speaking with a friend with FASD this week, and they said I could share this with you in this context. I think it just really demonstrates both of those domains you were talking about, and that is that they were raised by their parent, but now the roles have reversed and they are now the caregiver for their parent. And so that's just building on that foundation of relationship, but also they're the ones now connecting the parent to the community. And that's such a beautiful model of interdependence right there, and how even that can change over time. And they asked me to share it because they said that's something that isn't out there enough, is how they are also helping others.
I love that. I don't know if I'm just really excited today, Nancy, but I love that too. And it's so great you said that, because one of the things we talk about with interdependence is that interdependence isn't just about having needs met. That's part of it, is I meet your needs, but it's the reciprocity, the back and forthness. So some of my needs are met, but I'm also meeting some of your needs.
Exactly.
So interdependency is a two-way street, and it's back and forth. And so it's not only just sort of that balance of where do I need help and where don't I? It's where can I give help? Where can I be purposeful and where can I be meaningful? Nancy, that's a powerful and critical part of interdependency, is that it's a two-way street.
Yeah. Or even just teaching us to live in the moment and enjoy the present and things like that. There's so many things that we can learn from each other. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to the questions though.
Okay.
But it's easy to go off on, it's more exciting to go off on tangents. But I'm also thinking, you've said essentially that this is your baby, this framework. It must be so exciting for you to see it actually being put into practice by professionals, by service providers, by families, or even by individuals. Do you have any examples of how the framework is being used?
Yeah. And in fact, for the folks who after today want to go and check out the new 2.0, we'll either get it into a link here today at some point, or I can pass it along and we'll make sure it's available
Sure.
to folks after this. But we actually included some of that in the new document. So if you take a look, you'll see a little bit of that. And the reason we did that is a lot of times people say, well, what am I supposed to do with this framework, right? Like it does allow for that same flexibility you talked about earlier, Nancy. It's by, creating this framework that allows for, personalization, but also broad use and application. People are kind of like, okay, what do I do? But people are amazing and they are so smart. They're so much smarter than me. I'm so appreciative of that. So what are people doing? One group, a large caregiver group, got together and asked for a little help and turned THO into a training program. So each domain has like some training resources that go with, and they work through it and they talk about it and they kind of support each other. And so it's become an actual approach to training and working with caregivers around enhancing their understanding around FASD and what their kiddos or their young adults or their large adults might need in terms of supporting them forward. And so I thought that's really great that it kind of was able to frame that for you. Another group, oh gosh, let me think. In Alberta here, our Métis organization actually used it to frame their whole Building Futures guidebook. And one of the things they did, guys, take a look at the guide because this is amazing. And is they took our little kind of ribby framework that we have.
It does look like ribs. I agree.
I know. I've heard a few things and people, and the ribs seem to stick for me too. I'm like, I guess we can work with it. I don't know until we come up with a better design. It's still ribby, but they took it and they changed the way it's kind of laid out and they wove it into a Métis sash. So they actually, Nancy, it's absolutely brilliant. So they've used the elements, they've used the domains, and they've set them up to create this Building Futures guidebook, and it's all around transitioning you through to adulthood. So what are the things that you need to consider in each of these domains, and how does this look, and how do we transit? Great stuff. And the information is in the THO 2.0. So if folks are going, I want to see that, take a look there, but then you can even get to their website and check out their really fantastic work. In New Brunswick, they used the THO framework as a part of a provincial resource guide. So they actually set it up at a provincial level to help guide professionals doing their work so that they could better integrate service delivery and consider the way that their systems are working in concert together at that provincial level. And so some of these are described in here. And of course, Ontario, I'm talking to you from Ontario, joining us from Ontario. There's a lovely group in Ontario, and they use this to do an environmental scan. So they actually said, we want to understand what resources, what we have available, what's going on here in Ontario in our region. So they took the framework and they said, okay, what do we have for physical needs? What do we have for attachment needs? What are the services available for education? What do we have going on for, social skills development? And then populated it in that way. And we're able to identify how their region is doing some things really well and where there might be gaps and also how they can provide this and use this as a resource to help caregivers then navigate the systems that are available and make sure they're capturing all of these needs. And, a few folks, even in their use, were saying things to me like, some of these things are obvious. We know we need educational support, for example. Obvious, I'll say that in air quotes, but, become more apparent maybe. And they said, what Healthy Outcomes has done by creating this framework for them as they utilized it in these ways, whether it is how caregivers navigate the system, how systems navigate, how policies sort of structure things in a more integrated way. it allows them to remember there's an entire person we're talking about here. And we can shift away from saying we're dealing with a problem we're trying to solve towards promoting healthy development with an individual and recognizing that there are a number of different places and spaces we need to be thinking about individuals and can't be missing. And that by taking care of, you know, some of these other needs, we're actually going to bolster the entire person, which will help to support, you know, educational needs, right? And we don't miss the person. And that's one of the things that I keep hearing back is it reminds us of that. So there's a few of the examples that way more and way better detail provided in the guide, but it's been very exciting for me to hear back from folks, and I continue. Yeah, Nancy, I'm like, all the time, I'm like, hey, if you use this, let me know, people, how is it working? And how can I, on my end, make it better so it's better working for all of you? Like, they might be like, well, if only you'd done, or if you thought of, I'd be like, okay, cool. How are we going to do that? How do we do better?
Well, and even today, I think we've got over 80 people on right now. If anybody watching is using the framework, why don't you pop it in the chat? Or if you know of other groups that are using it, this is a great opportunity to share what you're doing. Or if you're even just having some ideas as you're listening, please feel free to share. So what you put in the chat will be seen by everybody. If you prefer to be anonymous, you can put it in the Q&A function and we can address it in a bit. Have you had any interest? I'm hoping the answer is yes, from government, either federal or provincial, to use elements of the framework. For instance, I know that there is a federal FASD strategy in the works. Is there any interest?
That's a good question. I think so. And the interest that I'm hearing of, and in a couple of provinces where it's kind of circled back to me, the interest, as I understand it, Nancy, seems to sit in how they create integrated systems of support. So they're thinking at a government level, if all these folks got to work together, how do they work together? And what are the barriers to working together? So for example, oh, this system can't talk to this system because they need 40 different pieces of paper signed first. Okay,
exactly.
So if we know that we need to frame and streamline, you know, something that help folks navigate all of these elements to work forward, how do we streamline them? Do we streamline that by you know, modifying or unifying kind of paperwork? And folks have talked about things like that in the past in terms of, you know, can we create streamlined systems where allowing people to talk is easier? Can we do things like actually build collaborative time into people's work schedule so that picking up the phone and talking to somebody isn't something you have to do over your lunch hour? So, or, you know, hospital staff, for instance, where they might be clocking their time in 15 or 30-minute intervals, and they're like, yeah, I don't have a number for that. Like, where do we actually start to become more intentional at a policy level, saying,
exactly,
you need to build a policy around collaborative practice, like that actually have time dedicated to it. So those kind of pieces can make a difference. You know, certainly there have been folks who've done research and in community who have also found some success, you know, utilizing, you know, frameworks like this and justifying frameworks like this as they think about hiring folks who can play roles as system navigators. Okay, so the paperwork's gonna be hard, the collaboration times. So we're actually gonna hire the person who's gonna bridge these gaps and work this through. That can be a, you know, a policy or an approach or response. So I think there are folks that the more we can provide evidence to say that doing work in this way is generating the best outcomes that we can imagine, and we can continue to capture that, then we can really hopefully continue to promote the story of investing the time in these integrated systems at that level of government. I think even Another place where the impact can be, I mean, there's so many places I could probably keep going, and others will probably have other things to say. Oh, Jackie, you didn't talk about this, but like training initiatives. How do we train folks consistently? How do we get people in the same space across all these systems?
Well, exactly. Because I'm even thinking here in Ontario, we have our wonderful FASD workers across the province. And I'm thinking it would be wonderful for them to be trained in this model. And then my brain keeps going because they only support up to age 18 or up to 21 if the young person is still in school. But I strongly think we need workers that are supporting adults with FASD, and this framework would work so well for that as well. But how do we do that?
Right. How do we get that going? And how does that, and if folks out there have great ideas, and please bring those ideas in. And you know, I'm, 2.0 is like I said, 2.0 started the day that the framework went out at the beginning. So 1.0 went out in, and then we immediately the next day we start on 2.0. What that means is we're working on 3.0 now. And that's not because I'm fickle, it's because this is a dynamic changing space that we are working and living in right now. And we're just going to keep getting better and keep growing. And just as we are talking about towards healthy outcomes for individuals, we're also talking about towards healthy outcomes as systems of support, as families, as communities, as regions, right? So we all need to keep moving towards those healthy outcomes. And that means it's not like we go, oh, it's all done. It's all taken care. No, it's far from perfect. But I think we're on a good path. And I think that if we continue to get folks engaged and having ideas and shaping it, that's where this is coming from now. I mean, I may say it's my baby, but it's not my brainchild. This is not my, I mean, I am just the one who has the really good fortune of bringing all of these really brilliant things together and then trying to do it some kind of justice as we put it out there for everyone, and then continuing to evolve it. So, I'll be interested in what folks have to say and offer and suggestions. Oh yeah, Nancy, keep it rolling.
Okay. And we do have a number of people joining us today who have FASD or have a family member with FASD. Can you tell us a little more about how they were involved in development of this framework? How did you reach out to them?
Yeah, that's a super question. And we reached out in a few different ways. And some is just informally as we knew people, some is through different advisory groups, some is just through distributing and saying, have a look, provide us feedback, much like we did even for this.
Yeah.
So it's not been a single one-stop, here's our consultation, we're done, let's move out. It's a constant, ongoing, take a look. What do you think? Love your feedback. Keep going, just as we draw input from everybody. And so we very specifically send it out to folks and communities and groups, and as they're willing to kind of take it on and take a look. Right. We've also done things, like the first one, when we were just putting the very first one together, the original framework, we shared it at a conference. One of the BC, I think it was maybe, I can't remember if it was the international one or the adult and adolescent one, back when we all used to have those wonderful days in BC, right, in Vancouver.
Yes.
And so we shared it there. We shared it as developmental. We said, this is not done. We're putting it together. Here's what we have. And of course, fortunately, those conferences have lots of caregivers, folks with FASD, all sorts of people there to lend their expertise to the conversation. And so we put it up and we showed it through, and I'm like, yeah, look how great we did. And this individual with FASD stands up, and I'm like, yeah, what do you think? Thinking, of course, you're going to tell me I'm amazing, right? And he said, yeah, this is not bad. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. But what he said, and it was really important, was he says, you keep talking about this being about me, but I don't see me in it. And I said, I don't know what you mean. And he says, where's my identity? Where's my sense of self? And I said, because in development, as a psychologist and people who do development, one of the important aspects of healthy development is actually gaining a healthy sense of yourself, an identity.
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I all about? Where am I going in life? And it's actually one of the central pillars of developmental psychology. We did not have identity as a domain at that time. I said, ah, thank you. We totally missed that. And he's like, how can you miss this? And I said, I don't know. We were probably still too problem focused. We were still kind of selecting domains around areas of challenge. And so we were really challenged by that. And since then, folks with FASD, they've just got some of the best insight. And of course, they know. They have just
the
one
experts
step after the time have influenced and informed us, Nancy. I am so deeply appreciative of that, because this would not be where it's at. And so that's kind of how. And if there are folks here on the call and you're like, oh, Jackie, I want to say more or do more, shoot me an email. I would love to hear from you.
Well, on that note,
Yes.
in preparation for this webinar, we did reach out to a number of people with FASD, family members, service providers, and professionals, and said, is there anything you would like us to ask? And we got a really interesting comment from somebody with FASD that they asked us to share. So they were looking through the initial version of Toward Healthy Outcomes, and there was a quote in it. And they had a problem with the quote. And I realize a quote isn't something that you can change, because it's what the person actually said. But I'm going to read you the quote, and then I'll tell you what the person with FASD was concerned about. The quote says, "It is a lonely existence to be a child with a disability which no one can see or understand. You exasperate your teachers, you disappoint your parents, and worst of all, you know that you are not just stupid." And this person with FASD had a big problem with that part, just stupid, because they said that implies that, to them, it implies that people with FASD are stupid, which we know they are not. And they said they really wish it had said instead, worst of all, you know that you are not stupid. So I'm just curious what you think about that feedback, because they were offended by it.
My mind is blown, as it always is. First, by the fact that we totally didn't catch that. Second, by the tremendous insight and generosity of folks to share back with us. Thank you to whoever that was. I'm going to go back in, and for those of you who are going to download that document, give me a couple of days, because we're going to remove the word just. We can throw in a few dots, you know, to represent the fact that the quote is not fully complete. But that is not what of course, that is not what the intent of the quote was. But it just goes to show how we miss things. We miss things all the time. Of course we do. We're all human, and we need community, and we need collective, and we need this stuff. And I'm so appreciative of that insight. Thank you. I'm going to make that change. I'm like, it's all I can do right now, not to be online sending a note saying I need to change the document stat. So I'm just restraining myself right now. You have to know, because wow. As you said it, I was like, oh, I heard it. And I just didn't get it before when I was reading it in the context with which and where it was, right? Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, whomever.
Well, it just demonstrates your commitment, Dr. Pei. It really does. And I think that's lovely. Actually, I kind of have goosebumps just from that piece of our conversation. And I agree. Thank you for sharing that feedback if you're watching us now. And we know that your framework uses a lifespan approach. I'm wondering if we could break it down. Could you give us like a little example of how you could use the framework if you're supporting children with FASD?
Yeah. And I think the framework is really to, you know, do a number of things. Like I say, get to a point of shared understanding, inform our perspective, make sure the research is there and accessible. So if you're working with a younger, it's a great chance to take a look and say, okay, physical health. are there some things here about physical health? Because physical health matters to all of us. And physical health and physical wellness, as it is now, is it's still foundational to the framework. And it's not because it only exists at the bottom, it's because it's foundational. So even though you'll notice that there's still people that go up the middle and they get older, it's not to say that the bottom stuff belongs to the kids and the top stuff belongs to the adults. It's to say this stuff is additive and this stuff kind of grows and has real impact as you go forward. So with littles, I'd be like, right away, have a look at that physical health and well-being. What are some of these foundational elements of physical wellness that we need to be aware of? Are we struggling with sleep? Have we considered how they might be experiencing pain? Things like Dr. Mansfield Mella's amazing medication algorithm. It's in there. Yeah. We put it in there. We said, hey, folks, notice this and remember this. And so that if you as a caregiver are working with a doc, you can say, hey, doc, here's this resource. Look at all these things that are for real, stuff that we need to be thinking about for folks with FASD, so that we can promote their physical wellness. If we've got a kiddo who's in, elementary school, that physical wellness still applies. Because if I've got a kiddo and they're in their seat and they're going like this and they're going like this, I might say, okay, is this something where they're restless? And are we thinking about how we could, help get their energy off? Is this somebody who hasn't slept particularly well? And so this is how they're trying to stay awake by keeping their body moving because they have challenges with sleep. Let's consider these physical wellness elements. Maybe this is a child who has pain. We know, thanks to the change makers and some of these folks who've done amazing work around physical body-based needs that are present for individuals with FASD, that they might experience significant pain at different stages and places in their life. And maybe the reason I'm moving in my chair is because I'm hurting and it feels uncomfortable to sit. I mean, I get that way sometimes. When I'm sitting, I got to get up, I got to stretch, I got to move because I start to get uncomfortable. So we can ask those questions. We can think about, if I'm interacting with a kiddo and they are distant or maybe a little surly with me, Jackie, I might ask, okay, how's your physical wellness? I might think, what's your attachment or relationship experience? Is it hard to trust me right now? Because maybe you're just particularly sensitized to me. Back to wellness, physical wellness. Maybe it's the lights are too bright in my room, right? I can kind of start working through these to try to understand and make sense of the challenges that you might be experiencing or the goals that you might be working towards. You desire a relationship, you want to be close, but that's a goal you're aiming for, but you don't really trust me. And so that's going to create this strange dynamic in that pursuit. So these are the kinds of spaces that I hope in using the framework allow us to say, all right, I'm observing and seeing that something is going on here. But rather than saying, I think I've got somebody who's disruptive, who doesn't care, who's oppositional, who's, any of these words we might use, I might see somebody who's struggling with a physical need, an attachment need, a social need, a wellness need, because they are striving towards a healthy outcome, just as I am. If I look at this, I might find a new way to interpret that behavior, and I might see then some options and opportunities as to what supports might make sense. What have other people done and what's working? How does changing and reframing my perspective equip me to handle things differently? If I see a child who's kind of being, struggling with me, and instead of saying this is a bad child, I say, what if this is an afraid child? What is this? Is it an insecure child? I'm going to deal with that real different. Right? Yes. I'm going to be like, how can I make you feel safe? How can I create safety in your space?
Okay, let's look at a different age group. And a passion of mine is advocating supports for older adults with FASD and older aged caregivers or senior aged caregivers. And I've run a lot of groups for these demographics. And what comes up often is the challenges with lifetime planning for after the parents or caregivers are gone, increasing health issues for both the caregiver and the older adult with FASD. I am sure there are a lot of ways this framework could be used to support those groups. I'm wondering if you have any ideas.
Oh, Nancy, I do and I don't, in the sense that, yeah, I have some thoughts, but I'm going to be really excited as you kind of think about it to hear what your thoughts are as we go forward. Truly, I think one of them is just to structure and validate the needs that exist. So even just what you said, they're going to have physical needs just as the person they're caring for is going to have physical needs. That's not actually a commonly understood thing.
Exactly.
I mean, you're an expert in the field, you know this, you're aware of this, you're thinking this way, but half the time you're trying to convince other people to understand that and think this way. So if we get to a point where frameworks are better understood, we can say that physical well-being one I keep talking about just because it's foundational, that doesn't go away when we're talking about somebody who's 30, 40, or 50. And while the research is still coming along, and hopefully 3.0 will be even beefier as it relates to those things for adults, we at least want to create space for that conversation. And we want to ask those questions. Relationships, they're all the way through. So what do those adult relationships look like as care needs are changing? How are we navigating them? We need those questions at the forefront, and frameworks to at least help us to make sure that we have those very questions, our mental wellness needs. And of course, some that are become very practical are the ones that we both started talking about when we start thinking about interdependency. And we start imagining how that might play out and look. The framework is also, it's a framework. It's just a framework. So it's not going to be do all be all, but sometimes what's nice about it too is it does give us a place to hold the other resources that are out there. So for example, when we're talking about adults and even 16, 17-year-olds, as we're thinking about adulthood in that transitional period, it alerts us to things to come. It reminds us that housing and employment and all of these things are reasonable, viable, and important goals for individuals to have. Where I'm going to live safely, what am I going to do to contribute? And so putting those things on the radar, having them something that we're tuned into, but also linking us to the resources like, oh, wait, here's a framework. Here's another guide that's specific to housing professionals that says, how do we provide FASD-informed housing? Well, here's an employment resource that we can take when we're talking to employment organizations, say, here's what FASD-informed employment can look like, or at least maybe a support if you're struggling to kind of bridge into how to best work with this group. So I see this as being a place where it can help keep things on our radar. It can help structure our programs, our organization, our planning. Folks can start having checklists and things like that. Say, have we actually asked these questions? Have we thought ahead to this? Have we thought back to this influence? Because this thing from a few years ago still matters. And this goal from tomorrow also matters. We need to recognize all these spaces are present for people. And then we want to be able to pull in the existing resources. And it's easier if there's more things in one place as opposed to having them all over. So we try to do that and try to provide that to make that very accessible.
Well, it's interesting too that it sounds also that even though we need interdependence, we need it beyond the family unit. That often it's the adult child and the caregiver that are interdependent, but how can we pull in more people that can take over some of those roles for when the parents aren't there? But even that often takes like even funding is a barrier I hear often, or yes, the caregiver needs respite, but it's not available. So again, it comes back to what you were saying too about systems needing to work together. And I think we really need to think outside the box and think down the road, because so much is being focused on children and youth. And these are the families that have been doing it without much support, because there wasn't much when they were raising their children. I think that's why I get so passionate, because It must get it's tiresome to always be kind of alone on that road.
Great.
Yeah.
I completely agree, and I hope I think still, Nancy, I think one of the spaces that we still need to get better is going to be adults. I think people will say, okay, they've done better with adults this time. We're not great yet. I don't think we're great yet, because I don't think we're great yet. And so I'm hoping, you know, that that's something that 3.0 will really be able to kind of shine with. And I really also really want to know, and I'm thinking about how and what we can do that helps to mobilize elements of this into those kind of policy spaces that are useful.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier for me, frankly, to imagine practice spaces. I'm a clinician. That's easy for me to think clinically, and how do we bring things together, and families and folks with FASD and fellow service providers. That is an easier space for me to occupy. I'm really dependent on those folks I know who sit in those higher spaces of management and policy development to say, help me think this through. And they have, and they've been amazing. But I feel like that's, Nancy, I think that's where it's going to go. And how do we continue to influence, and how do we continue to, you know, put this kind of information into the hands of folks that can actually action it?
Right.
You know, because even if we all know what we need to do, if we feel that we're then, you know, unable to do that, that can even be sometimes more frustrating than not knowing.
Right. Yes, agreed. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I was noticing when I was reviewing the materials, information about the Connect program for caregivers of teens. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that program.
Connect program. I think we mentioned it in one of the sections, and I think if I'm remembering right, I have to think about where it is, which, you know, you're taxing me on a Tuesday.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just I'm pretty sure that's referring to the program in Calgary, Alberta. But if I'm wrong, I can look it up and follow.
Okay.
But like they have sort of a coordinated resource program where they help to integrate and coordinate and navigate sort of system support, and includes, I think, a large number of programs in their region.
Okay.
Within that service network region. I think it's one of the programs that they operate, which is really cool, frankly.
Mhm.
And you know, like they even have like a 24-hour support hub line and stuff like that. Like they're doing so they're doing some really important things to do exactly what we're talking about, which is to connect and bring people together. And they're one of the groups who we've had great conversations about THO and outcomes and measuring these kinds of outcomes. So I think if you look it up, if you just look up Connect, maybe Connect FASD Alberta, maybe put it in that way, you'll see a little bit of the list of all the stuff they've got going on. I'm hoping that's the right one that you're thinking, because
thank you.
But
That's
Calgary, it's really cool. And it's the Calgary Fetal Alcohol Network, and they are just doing some absolutely outstanding stuff. So yeah, have a check. Yeah. Really neat.
I'm just looking at the Q&A. So I'm actually going to just start at the top. Someone has said, respectfully, I can't help but feel as though there has been more than enough research lining the pockets of researchers and doctors that we can now just focus on putting research money into really supporting and helping those with FASD. It's not really a question, but do you have any comment on that, Dr. Pei?
I would love to see us getting more. Absolutely. I think the more we can put into providing support is really, I think it's great. I mean, research is valuable. Research helps us to understand, you know, what's working, what's not. What I'm really excited about where research is going is that so much of what we're doing in intervention and research now is working with community providers. So while there are still some folks that do more lab or experimental kinds of things that are a little bit more controlled, a lot of us are actually working with folks doing service delivery. And we come alongside those folks and we say, hey, because we don't, we can get some funding and grant to support our students, but we don't, as researchers, get extra money for doing research. We don't get paid for our research. The research goes to our students. It doesn't go directly to us at all. And often we'll actually do programs because we can hire program people to help out with research or offer honoraria or other kind of things like that. To bring them on, and then we can kind of come along programs and say, hey, I have a student here and they'll learn a lot, and we can do some research together and we'll capture the outcomes and learn a little bit about what's working for you. And so I think that's the best partnership of all, because then we're doing it. We're doing the work, and I think we're doing the work, but we're also doing the work with accountability, because sometimes intervention does harm. And so we need to know that what we're doing is not harmful, but what is helpful.
Right.
So yeah, so I appreciate the question though, and I appreciate the passion for helping folks with FASD and walking with them in this. So thank you for that.
I'm going to come back to a question that someone has written, but I just want to share. We have some really interesting examples from people of how they're using your framework. I think this will excite you. I hope to be using it as a framework for an FASD model home for 2 youth who will transition into adulthood in the same home. When they move, it will be their forever home. They will transition from youth into adult. It's a hope. Okay, another person said.
Okay, can I just jump in and say that is amazing and brilliant? And whoever said that, if you want to send me an email later, I would love to hear how it goes. I'd love for other people to hear how it goes.
I wonder if I'm guessing we can get a copy of all of this for you to keep as well. Here's the next one. We are starting with the youth to adult transition, developing programming that encompasses life skills, social skills, and navigating the adult world without the supports they may have had when they were younger. Ooh, here's some more. Ready? In New Brunswick, we have incorporated the THO in our 5-year action plan, and we are hoping to incorporate it in our provincial strategic plan in the future. We are working on building FASD lead positions at all levels of government, health, education, SD, justice, Indigenous affairs. Next, as an FASD United Family Navigator, I often utilize the THO framework with the families and or professionals that reach out to us. Another person said, I reference and use the framework quite regularly in my practice. I try to develop a circle of care for the adults that I work with because we can't do this work alone. Policy to follow for collaborative care is essential. Another person said we added the THO 2.0 in our diagnostic clinic as a recommendation for professionals. We recommend professionals take a look at this guide to help implement FASD-informed practices within their organization. Okay.
And you know, I want to I just want to add to that one comment that was made by Annette. And in fact, we're working with a number of clinics in Canada, and THO has been developed into what's called a COMPASS report, which is a navigational clinical report that's going to be computer generated by clinics who choose to use it, framing the actual unique needs of their child within the framework to help them navigate systems of support. So we're trying to create sort of a clinical presentation of THO for use. So very much what Annette, who has been amazing, yay Annette, too. In some of the work that we've been doing in this regard, she's been very helpful. But I didn't think to bring that up, and I'm like, how did I not say that? But anyway.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay, I have a question for you. Helping elderly parent with dementia while having FASD is extremely difficult, and there are no supports from community or family, even more isolating than just living with FASD. Is there some way you can suggest ways to engage the community and or government to help those in my position? Thank you.
Oh man, I wish I had a magic wand and an easy answer. I don't. I can't imagine how isolating and how difficult it is. And I think that's exactly, Nancy, what you were talking about when you were talking about that care needs for both the caregiver and, and who was cared for now becoming the caregiver, right? It's these changing relationships and changing roles. How do we get folks involved? I mean, within communities, it's great when we have programs and, and Nancy, I know you can, depending on where you're speaking from, there are some communities that have some, FASD informed programs and spaces to reach out to and community supports where they're available. It's different in every province because of course it is. It'd be nice if it were easier. I'm hoping that, we can get better and maybe if this person, ever wants to reach out and identify even, things that might be helpful or useful in terms of how a framework as we have could, are there things or ways to put it together so that it does, helps with communication and maybe with some of the advocacy that at an individual level, I don't know. Yeah. Long story short, I don't know. I don't have the answer and I sure don't have the magic wand, but that is not a new question. You're not alone. And there are unfortunately a lot of folks who are struggling. I think that we need to get this one figured out as a community and as a large group.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a comment from a caregiver. She said, for caregivers, it's an amazing framework for us to see where we can focus our energy throughout the different ages and stages. Love keeping the interdependence throughout the lifespan and normalizing it within our family unit, which is lovely. Someone who said they were almost 60 appreciate talking about the situation for older caregivers and adults. Lots of positive comments. Someone made a lovely comment. This is an FASD worker, said, I don't know what I would do without the work of the researchers from CanFASD. I feel confident in my interventions. And like Jackie said, we're doing no harm. So I think I covered all the questions. We have a few minutes left. If anybody has questions, please add them now. But I think actually it's better to move on and just say, you've been mentioning a few things about the 3.0 version, Dr. Pei. Do you have anything else you want to tell us about when that might be coming out and what you see as exciting about that version?
Sure, I'd love to. And if it's all right, Nancy, while I'm doing that, I'm just going to share screen here and that just my contact info. So while I'm talking, I'll just show folks a couple of things.
Excellent.
Because I got so exciting. I got excited. I don't know that I was excited at all. I was certainly excited. Anyway, this is my email on here, folks, and I'll leave it up. And I'm just going to step away from this for a second, come back. So don't panic, but I just wanted you to have a look. Here's our visual again. Looks very much like the last one. It's just got a few less things going on. This is what the front of the guide looks like. Really highlighting it's a framework for integrated community intervention. So we're really talking about the community and the integrated. And then you see that, for example, physical well-being, we continue to talk about FASD informed. FASD is whole body diagnosis. We try to connect you to lots of resources and links and material. So check it out, highlight, and we did this before, but we're just continuing to do it. So hopefully it's really clear and accessible to folks. So I just wanted to show a couple of those pictures. Of course, it's all in the guide and you can all get access to that. And I'll try to get you that email, Nancy, as soon as I can. 3.0, I think for 3.0, we want to just keep rolling forward. I do think that, we do need to get better with adults and stuff like that. So I would like to see that stronger. I would like to continue to think about ways or formats or resources that are even more useful to potential users. So they might say, well, this great PDF is awesome, Jackie, but it's enormous. It would be really nice if we had A, B, or C to go with it. We are hoping to evolve a website and have a website that will go with it. So it's going to look kind of like the ribs and we'll have the guide. So I'm hoping that that will actually happen in the next few months and that we're going to kind of have, make better use of our website. to put that in, and that might even allow us to be a bit more fluid in our updates. So even though the PDF might update every 2 to 3 years, depending on my timelines, I always say 2 years and it turns into 3 or 4. I don't know where the time goes, but anyway. But the website, I'm hoping then we could be a bit more fluid and keep that updating more regularly. So that's something else I really hope to do, Nancy. And I just hope to stay, you know, really receptive. You guys have way better ideas than I do. And I really think that sometimes community, just like when we all think together and we brainstorm, and the opportunity to come and talk like with you today, Nancy, this gets us all thinking. And then we'd say, oh, I wonder, I never tried this. Maybe I could do that. And then you try it and you go, it kind of worked. It sort of worked. It totally worked. It didn't work. Any of those responses is really helpful, because then we can take that, roll it into 3.0 and say, okay, let's do more of this. Let's go in this direction. And then we continue to use the evidence we collect and we roll it forward and away we go.
Oh, well, I'm going to ask Maureen to join us to close us off, but I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Pei. That was really interesting, and I got very excited about a lot of the things that we discussed. So thank you for all the work you do, most sincerely, and we hope we see you again. And over to you, Maureen.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming, spending this hour and 15 minutes with us. And we hope to see you soon for our next webinars. Thank you, everyone.